She came to the mansion with a secret, a lie that could change everything. But what she discovered behind the doors was far more dangerous than she ever imagined. Whispers in the shadows, hidden truths, and a family willing to protect its dark secrets at any cost. Will she survive the night, or will the mansion claim her too? Watch till the end to uncover the shocking truth. The grand gates of the Lee family mansion loomed over the street, their black lacquered with glinting under the soft morning light. Inside, the walls whispered secrets, and the polished floors reflected the silent footsteps of those who walked with hidden intentions. I stepped hesitantly through the entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had come with a single purpose, wrapped in the guise of duty and obedience. The household knew her as a demure daughter-in-law, poised and polite, yet beneath that carefully painted mask, a storm brewed. Her husband, Lin, was distant and cold. His eyes carried the weight of generations, a responsibility he wore like armor. I had learned quickly that love and respect in the Lee mansion were traded commodities, measured and rationed, rarely given freely. She moved quietly through the drawing room, her fingers grazing the carved arms of the ancient chairs. Every corner of the mansion seemed alive with observation. Portraits of stern ancestors stared down from gilded frames, as though judging her every thought. Her plan was simple but dangerous. To secure her place and influence, she had fabricated a story of pregnancy. Each careful smile, each whispered word to servants, reinforced the illusion. I knew the truth was fragile, like a crystal poised to shatter at the slightest touch. The first few days passed in tense harmony. Lin remained indifferent, preoccupied with the affairs of the estate. The servants observed quietly, their loyalty to the family unyielding, their curiosity toward her story growing with every whispered rumor. One evening, as the sky burned with the colors of dusk, I overheard voices from the study. Her ears strained to catch the words. Lin spoke of debts, of betrayals, of hidden truths that no one had uncovered. Her heart tightened. What if her deception collided with secrets she was not meant to know? The mansion itself seemed to pulse with warning. Shadows stretched along the walls, flickering like silent watchers. In the kitchen, the cook paused mid-step, staring at her with a knowing look that made her stomach churn. I realized that in this house, nothing was ever truly hidden. A week later, Lin's father, the patriarch of the family, returned unexpectedly from his travels. His presence was like a storm entering a still room. He examined her quietly, his eyes sharp and calculating. I forced herself to maintain the composure of a loyal daughter-in-law, but every heartbeat rang in her ears, loud and accusing. Dinner that night was a tense display of silent calculation. Words were minimal, but every glance carried weight. I sensed the subtle scrutiny, the probing questions hidden in polite conversation. Each smile she offered felt like a balancing act on a razor's edge. In the quiet of her room later, I allowed herself a brief moment of fear. What if her charade was discovered? What if the very people she hoped to manipulate had already seen through her lies? The thought gnawed at her, relentless and merciless. And then, in the middle of the night, she heard it. A faint creak from the hall, followed by the softest whisper of movement. Someone was in the mansion, someone who should not be there. Her breath caught. Every instinct screamed danger, but curiosity, that perilous companion, urged her to follow. The secret she sought might unravel everything, or it might reveal truths even darker than her own deception. The mansion held its breath, and so did she, stepping into the unknown corridor where shadows whispered and reality teetered between revelation and ruin. Mai's footsteps were careful, deliberate, as she moved along the dimly lit corridor. The air smelled faintly of dust and polished wood, mingled with something faintly metallic, almost like the scent of old secrets. Her pulse raced, each beat echoing in the silence, making the shadows seem alive, crawling along the walls with intent. She reached the top of the staircase and paused, listening. The faint sound had stopped, replaced by the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall below. She had imagined it at first, a trick of her own tension. But no, something lingered in the air, deliberate and calculated. Slowly, she inched forward, her hand brushing against the wall for balance. Every nerve in her body screamed to retreat, but her curiosity was stronger than fear. She had always believed that knowledge was power, even in a house that thrived on deception. The faint whispering returned, more distinct this time, almost a murmur of words she could not comprehend. She crept closer to the study door, the same room she had overheard Lin and his father discussing debts and betrayals. The handle was cold under her fingers. Her breath came in shallow bursts. I pressed her ear to the door, straining to hear. A muffled conversation reached her, voices low and careful. One was unmistakably Lin's, measured and authoritative. The other was unfamiliar, older, rasping, carrying an edge of menace that sent a shiver down her spine. She stepped back slightly, her mind racing. Who could be in the house at this hour? The servants would not dare enter. Without permission, Lin's father, Shirley, was already retired to his quarters. And yet, the voices persisted, deliberate, secretive. Then, without warning, a cold draft swept the corridor, carried with a faint scent of burning incense, and a trace of something she could not name. The whispering ceased abruptly, replaced by silence so deep it pressed against her eardrums. Mai's stomach knotted. She felt eyes on her, though the corridor remained empty. A sudden creak from the study door made her step back. The door was ajar now, just a sliver, enough for a shadow to move within. Heart pounding. Mai considered retreating, but the magnetic pull of forbidden knowledge rooted her in place. She had to know what secrets were being concealed, even if they threatened to undo everything she had constructed. She reached for the door handle, but just as her fingers touched the cold brass, the whisper returned. It was closer this time, almost behind her, low and deliberate. Mai spun around, every muscle coiled, but the corridor was empty. Only the flickering candlelight danced, as though mocking her fear. The study door shifted again, opening slowly of its own accord, as if inviting her in. Mai's mind screamed caution, but her legs moved forward, each step measured and deliberate. She glanced inside. The room was dim, lined with books and ancient artifacts, the air heavy with the weight of generations. On the desk lay a single envelope, sealed with crimson wax. No one was in sight, yet the whispering persisted, wrapping around her like smoke. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. Inside, she could sense the beginning of a truth far larger than any she had imagined, a secret that could shatter the family, unravel her carefully crafted lie, and leave her powerless in a mansion that thrived on control. And then, just as she touched the envelope, a shadow flickered across the far wall. She turned sharply, expecting to confront an intruder, or even Lin himself, but there was nothing. The candle flame flickered violently, sending dancing shadows across the portraits of grim ancestors. Mai's chest tightened. Something was in the room with her, unseen but undeniably present. She could feel it. The subtle brush of cold air, the faint scent of leather and earth, and a presence that did not belong to the living. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs refused to obey. The whispering grew again, rising from the walls, the floor, the very air around her, forming words that she could almost understand. It was a warning, a lure, a promise all at once. Her fingers lingered on the envelope, knowing that whatever lay within could change everything, or end her story entirely. Mai swallowed hard. She was about to open it, to uncover the truth hidden by years of deception, when the candle went out. Darkness engulfed the room, thick and suffocating. The whispering ceased abruptly, replaced by a silence so complete it pressed against her mind. She froze, heart hammering, breath caught, aware that every moment now could tip the scales of fate. And then, in that oppressive silence, she sensed movement behind her, a deliberate, patient motion, as though someone or something had been waiting for her all along. Mai's hand hovered over the envelope, the truth within inches, but the presence behind her remained unseen, its intention unknown. The mansion held its breath, the shadows watching, and in that suspended moment, nothing happened. And yet, in that stillness, the story was far from over. The secrets of Lee Mansion were only beginning to stir, and Mai had stepped into a game far larger than herself, a web of lies and revelations that would not wait. But the world outside would not see the outcome, not yet. The darkness in the study pressed against Mai like a living thing, heavy and suffocating. She could hear the faint rasp of her own breathing. each inhalation a small rebellion against the silence that surrounded her. Her hand lingered over the envelope, the wax seal cool and unyielding beneath her fingers. She wanted to open it, to finally pierce the veil of secrets, yet an instinct older than fear held her back. The presence behind her shifted imperceptibly, a subtle movement that sent a chill crawling up her spine. It was patient, deliberate, waiting. I felt the weight of its gaze, unseen yet undeniable, burning into her back, and she knew that any sudden motion could provoke the unknown. She inched backward, her shoes whispering against the polished floor, the carpet muffling some sound but not all. Each step was careful, measured, yet the envelope called to her. It promised answers, revelations, perhaps even the keys to her survival in a house that rewarded cunning above all else. A sudden gust of wind swept through the study, though no windows were open. The candle flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls, elongating and twisting the portraits of ancestors who had watched over the mansion for centuries. The shadows seemed to converge, moving closer, as if aware of her hesitation. Mai's pulse thundered in her ears. She glanced toward the far corner of the room and thought she saw a figure crouched in the darkness. But when she blinked, it was gone. Only the envelope remained, innocuous yet lethal in its implications. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. Time had lost meaning in the oppressive blackness. The mansion itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to act. Her fingers brushed the wax once more. She could feel the faint ridges of the seal, the texture almost daring her to break it. And then she heard it, a soft, deliberate step from behind, slow and heavy, echoing in the cavernous room. Mai froze, her chest constricting with every heartbeat. She did not dare look, did not dare move. The step came closer, then stopped. Silence followed. Complete, suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of her own trembling breath. Her mind raced, imagining the worst. Was it Lin? His father? A stranger? Or something older, something that belonged to the mansion itself? She could not see, could not confirm, yet she could feel it. Presence and intent coiled around her like smoke, invisible but suffocating. She clenched her fists, resolving to face it, to act. But as she reached for the envelope again, the candle flickered one final time and went out completely, plunging the room into absolute darkness. Her fingers froze midair. The envelope waited, silent and still, as if mocking her indecision. She could hear nothing now but the rapid rhythm of her own pulse. She did not move, did not breathe too deeply, for fear of disturbing whatever lingered. Time seemed suspended. The presence remained, patient and watchful, neither advancing nor retreating, as though it had no intention of revealing itself. Hours might have passed, or perhaps only moments. The mansion was still, yet alive with a silent energy that pressed against her skin, cold and unyielding. The envelope lay untouched. Behind her, the invisible gaze waited. She dared not turn, dared not open, yet she could not leave either. And then, without warning, the softest whisper brushed the edge of her mind, unintelligible but unmistakably deliberate. It was a single word, a name perhaps, or a warning. She could not tell. It was enough to root her to the spot, paralyzing her with anticipation and dread. Mai remained there, frozen, caught between revelation and ruin, trapped in a moment that stretched endlessly. The envelope waited, the presence watched, and the mansion held its breath. Nothing moved, yet everything was poised to strike. And still, she did not open it. The candle had burned out completely, yet the shadows did not recede. The whispering had ceased, but the tension remained, thick and unbroken, leaving her suspended in a limbo of fear, curiosity, and inevitability. Mai had come seeking truth, but the mansion had other plans. She would wait, perhaps for hours, perhaps for the rest of the night. Every instinct screamed to flee, to act, to rip the envelope open, yet the mansion itself seemed to hold her in place, demanding patience, feeding suspense, weaving a tension so exquisite that it would not allow resolution. And so she waited. The room remained dark, silent, and unbearable in its stillness. Outside, the wind whispered against the mansion walls, carrying the faintest echoes of secrets yet unrevealed. Mai's hand hovered over the envelope, trembling slightly. The presence behind her remained, patient, silent, unseen, and utterly implacable. She would wait, and the audience with her, caught in that moment of anticipation that promised everything and yet delivered nothing. The truth, the revelation, the confrontation, all deferred, suspended, lingering just beyond reach. And in that drawn-out stillness, the story continued, a perfect trap of suspense, leaving hearts racing and minds teetering on the edge of discovery. The darkness in the study had settled like a living shroud, thick and unyielding, wrapping around Mai's shoulders. Her hand hovered above the envelope, the wax seal cold against her skin, almost vibrating with an unspoken promise. Each moment stretched unbearably, measured in heartbeats that pounded like the tolling of a distant bell. A faint draft brushed against her neck, carried with it the scent of aged paper, leather, and something else she could not name, a metallic tang that made her stomach tighten. She turned slowly, convinced she might finally glimpse the presence she had felt so acutely. But the room was empty. Nothing moved, yet everything whispered in anticipation. The mansion itself seemed to shift. The floorboard beneath her feet groaned ever so slightly, as if remembering steps from decades past. The walls, lined with portraits of grim ancestors, appeared to lean closer, their painted eyes glinting in the darkness. It was as though they were watching her, judging her, waiting for her to make a choice that would either elevate or destroy her. Mai's chest tightened, every breath shallow. She wanted to open the envelope, to tear the seal, to confront whatever truths it held. Yet she could not. The presence behind her remained invisible but unmistakable, patient and inexorable, a silent force that anchored her in place. She inched toward the desk, fingers trembling, every nerve screaming with both fear and anticipation. The envelope remained still, innocent in appearance but deadly in implication. Each step she took seemed to echo unnaturally in the study, a hollow sound that emphasized the mansion's oppressive silence. A clock struck midnight somewhere in the distance, its sound muted yet profoundly resonant, slicing through the darkness. At that moment, she felt a shift behind her, subtle but undeniable. Her hair rose on the back of her neck. She turned slightly, barely daring to look, but nothing was there. Then, a sound, a soft, deliberate rustle, like the brush of silk against the floor, came from the far corner of the room. Her heart leapt. It was a movement, or perhaps an illusion, a trick of shadows and imagination. She could not tell. She remained frozen, hands suspended over the envelope, caught between impulse and fear. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The candlelight that had once flickered was long gone, leaving only darkness and a suffocating stillness that pressed into her very bones. She could feel her pulse in her throat, could hear it in the tips of her fingers. Every beat a reminder of the moment suspended between revelation and ruin. A whisper drifted across the room, too faint to understand but undeniably directed at her. It was a voice that seemed to come from the walls themselves, from the shadows that clung to the corners, and from the floorboards beneath her feet. It beckoned warning and tempted all at once. Mai's fingers brushed the wax again, hesitant, trembling. The envelope waited, silent and patient, as if daring her to make a choice. And still, the presence behind her remained, unseen, unmoving, an unyielding force that forbade action yet demanded attention. Minutes, or perhaps hours, passed. She could not tell. Her senses were heightened to a painful degree. Every creak, every whisper, every shadow became amplified, weighted with meaning she could not yet decipher. The mansion held her in place, suspended in a moment of anticipation that felt infinite. She wanted to scream, to break the tension with action, yet every instinct told her that to move was to invite danger, to act prematurely was to risk everything she had worked for. The envelope remained untouched, the presence remained unseen, and the shadows waited. Outside, the wind whispered against the mansion's walls, carrying echoes of secrets yet unrevealed. Somewhere in the distance, a door clicked softly, a sound so small yet so deliberate that it cut through the oppressive silence like a knife. Mai's breath caught. She turned slightly toward the sound, expecting confrontation, yet nothing happened. The door did not open further. The sound did not repeat. And still, she remained there, poised over the envelope, caught between discovery and peril, trapped in a tension that refused resolution. The mansion itself seemed to pulse with patience, prolonging the suspense, stretching the moment into an exquisite torment. Time had no meaning. Nothing moved, yet everything was poised, as if the very air conspired to hold her on the edge of revelation without ever letting her fall. Mike could feel it in her bones, in the hairs standing on her arms, in the cold tightness that gripped her chest. She would wait. The envelope would wait. The presence would wait. And the audience, along with her, would remain suspended in the suffocating, intoxicating stillness of anticipation, craving a resolution that the mansion refused to give. Nothing happened. The study remained draped in darkness, thick and almost tangible, pressing against Mai's skin. Her hand hovered just above the envelope, frozen, yet drawn to it like a moth to a flame. Every nerve in her body screamed caution, yet every instinct of curiosity pulled her closer. She could almost feel the weight of what lay inside, the truths she had chased, the lies she had spun, and the dangerous game she had stepped into. A faint shuffle echoed somewhere behind her, just at the edge of hearing. She did not dare turn. Not yet. She could feel it, the presence, invisible but undeniable, hovering the room, patient, silent, deliberate. Her pulse drummed violently in her ears, loud enough to drown out all other sounds. Mai's fingers brushed the wax again. The seal was smooth, cold, unyielding, and yet there was something else beneath it, a faint vibration, almost imperceptible, as though the envelope itself sensed her hesitation. She swallowed hard, her throat dry, her thoughts spinning like a storm. The mansion seemed to breathe with her, each floorboard creaking like a sigh, the walls closing in as though to watch her struggle. Outside, the wind whispered against the ancient windows, carrying faint sounds of life and movement, though none could be seen. A candle flickered briefly in the far corner of the room, though she knew no candle could be there. Its light danced across the walls, stretching and bending, casting shapes that seemed almost human. Shadows reached toward her, yet retreated when she moved her eyes. The mansion was alive, patient, waiting for her to act, or perhaps for her to fail. Her ears caught a soft rustle again, closer this time. It was deliberate, careful, calculated. She could not see anything, yet every fiber of her body knew someone, or something, was in the room with her. She froze. Every heartbeat echoed in the cavernous study. Every shallow breath was a drumbeat of anticipation. My inch closer to the envelope, trembling. Her hand hovered over it again, unsure, unwilling to commit. A whisper caressed the edge of her consciousness. Words? She could not make them out, but it carried the unmistakable tone of warning. Perhaps it was a name. Perhaps it was a threat. Perhaps it was a lure. Then, a sudden movement. A shadow flickered at the corner of her vision. She turned sharply, only to see nothing. The room remained empty, still, yet she could feel the presence intensifying behind her. It was patient, deliberate, testing her resolve, holding her in suspended anticipation. Minutes passed, or hours. She could not tell. The mansion seemed to stretch time itself, a deliberate act of cruelty or ritual. Every nerve in her body screamed to act, to tear the envelope open, to confront the truth. And yet she could not. The unseen force behind her refused to allow it. She leaned closer to the envelope, the temptation almost unbearable. Fingers brushing the paper. She felt a sudden chill run through her entire body. The presence behind her shifted, subtle but deliberate. She knew it was watching, weighing her, waiting for a sign of weakness. Outside the study, the wind grew louder, whispering through the halls like voices from the past. The floorboards moaned as if echoing the mansion's breath. The portraits on the walls seemed to lean closer, their eyes following her every movement. The candlelight flickered once more, casting elongated shadows that writhed across the walls. Her hand hovered above the envelope. She could feel the faint vibration beneath the seal. The presence remained behind her, patient, unyielding, unmoving. Time stretched endlessly. Every second became unbearable, thick with anticipation. Every instinct told her to flee, yet every desire anchored her in place. And then, in the silence, she heard it, a soft, deliberate tap on the far window pane. The sound was singular, precise, a signal, a warning, or perhaps a lure. She turned slowly, straining to see, but nothing appeared. The window was closed. The night outside remained still. The envelope waited. The presence waited. The shadow remained unseen. And still nothing happened. Mai's hand hovered, trembling, suspended in that exquisite moment of tension, caught between action and restraint. The mansion held its breath. The audience held theirs. The secret within the envelope, the force behind her, the unseen shadow, all remained unresolved, suspended in time, drawing hearts into a relentless anticipation that would not be satisfied. The night pressed on. The mansion waited. And I remained poised, frozen, caught on the precipice of discovery that would never arrive, at least not yet. The first light of dawn seeped through the high windows of the mansion, painting the walls in pale gold and muted shadows. The oppressive weight of the night still lingered, but the darkness no longer had dominion. I stood in the study, hand hovering above the envelope one last time, her chest tight with anticipation and fear. The presence that had haunted her all night had not revealed itself fully. She did not need to see it. The mansion, with its quiet whispers and creaking floors, had made its intentions clear. Secrets, once unearthed, carried consequences that could not be ignored. I drew in a deep breath, feeling the tension finally begin to ease. With deliberate calm, she lifted the envelope and broke the wax seal. Inside was a single stack of papers, letters, photographs, and documents detailing betrayals, manipulations, and hidden debts that had shaped the Lee family for generations. The truth was staggering, the depth of deception more vast than she could have imagined. I read, her eyes widening at the revelations. Lynn's father concealed financial ruin, masked his honor. Allies within the mansion had plotted behind closed doors. And most damning of all, she discovered a plan that had involved her from the start, not just as a pawn, but as a potential key to reshaping the power within the household. The final document bore her name, written in the patriarch's precise hand. It was not a threat nor a condemnation. It was a challenge, a test of her cunning, her resilience, and her patience. The envelope's contents illuminated a single truth. The mansion rewarded intelligence, foresight, and courage, and Maya had passed its silent, unyielding test simply by enduring. She lowered the papers, her mind racing, her heart steady for the first time in hours. The mansion seemed to exhale, as though acknowledging her understanding. The shadows in the room receded with the dawn, no longer threatening but neutral, like silent observers who had witnessed the balance of power shift without intervention. Lynn entered the study then, quiet and deliberate, his expression unreadable. He did not speak, but his gaze met hers. In that silent exchange, the tension of the past nights dissolved. He had seen her endurance, her resolve, and perhaps for the first time, he respected her, not just as a daughter-in-law, but as a player in the household's intricate game. I returned his gaze steadily. There was no triumph in her eyes, no gloating satisfaction, only a quiet understanding. In a house built on secrets and control, survival required patience, intelligence, and the courage to face truths without flinching. The envelope, once a symbol of fear and anticipation, now rested on the desk, a testament to her journey and the lessons she had learned. She did not need to read it again. The mansion had shown her its depth, its danger, and its hidden beauty. And in turn, she had emerged not unscathed, but wiser, stronger, and irrevocably changed. I stepped to the window and looked out over the estate. The morning light glimmered across the gardens, the ponds, the carved stone pathways. For the first time, the mansion felt less like a prison and more like a kingdom. Its secrets vast, but no longer a threat to her alone. The story of deceit, patience, and courage had reached its crescendo. The night had tested her, the shadows had watched, and the envelope had revealed what was necessary. I knew the mansion's power would endure, and so would she. And somewhere deep within the walls, perhaps the unseen presence still lingered, observing silently. But I no longer feared it. She had faced the darkness, understood it, and emerged with her mind and heart intact. The mansion held its secret still, as it always would. But for the game was hers to navigate, her place within it secured, her resilience proven. The wind whispered softly against the windows, carrying the faintest echo of the night's trials, now distant but unforgettable. I turned away, stepping into the rest of her life, ready for whatever lay beyond the shadows. The story had reached its ending, not with noise, but with quiet strength, and with the unspoken knowledge that in a house of secrets, patience and intelligence could illuminate even the darkest corners.